So welcome everybody. It's great to be back with another Tourism Talks, and it's even better to be back with the wonderful Paul Zahra, who is the CEO of the Australian Retailers Association, with an amazing background over many years in the retail sector. And we're going to have a bit of a chat today about how they've been affected by COVID and the crossovers between tourism and the retail sector. Welcome, Paul. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Margy. Thank you for your lovely introduction. That's very special. Thank you.
My pleasure entirely. So these have been incredibly tough times for all of us, but I think anybody who's being honest would say the two sectors that have been affected most have definitely been retail and the tourism sector. Do you want to walk me through what the impact's actually been on your sector and on the jobs in that sector?
Sure. First thing I'll probably say is that tourism and retail work hand in hand, of course, and I think we're sort of codependent. So when we're sort of deeply affected, I think from a retail point of view, what's been interesting for me, because I've spent my whole career in retail, is that we've just seen an acceleration of trends that were already occurring, but a decade's worth delivered in the space of like 6 to 12 months. So it's been interesting. I think it's been very challenging for retailers, but it's also brought about opportunities. So the two biggest major trends that have come forward have been obviously digital transformation, which has really been around online shopping and people shopping from home, but equally it's been around contactless shopping. So think click and collect, using cards, not cash. So, if you're an omni-channel retailer right now, you're doing particularly well. If you haven't planned for this, of course, many retailers have had to pivot very quickly to be ready for and to deal with this pandemic.
So, I think one of the other issues that is a commonality for both of us is we're probably industries that are affected more than any other by the issues around borders, whether that be domestic or whether that be international. Do you want to just walk through the issues for you? And I know that Victoria is a particular issue, but in addition to that, international travellers love to shop when they come here. That must be leaving a big hole as well.
Absolutely, Margy. So what we've seen, of course, is that when international tourists visit Australia, we think it's about, according to the ABS, about $60 billion. So that's a big hole to fill. We see those consumers particularly in CBD locations and in regional locations. So they've been the hardest hit. So if you take a CBD location, they've had a double whammy. So people working from home, the lack of international tourists, that lack of any tourists, to be honest, even to be frank, even domestic tourists, has meant that CBD locations have done it particularly tough. So we've got national retailers that have given us great insights where they might be in double-digit trading in categories that are doing well. And take a pharmacy as a good example, doing double-digit sales improvement in suburban locations, but their CBD locations might be minus 90. So this is like a Sydney number. In Victoria, of course, it's zero because they're in complete lockdown.
So what does this mean, do you think? Does it have bigger implications for bricks and mortar stores? I mean, the whole argument about digital means the death of the bricks and mortar store. Has COVID put the nail in that coffin, or are we just all desperate to get back out and be in the reality of shopping in the flesh?
A good question. Look, it's definitely not the death of retail. It's whilst there's consumers, they'll consume. And I guess it's probably the rebirth of retail though, Margy, because what we're seeing is that, we had the biggest online shopping period in the month of August, according to ABS data. So plus 85%. And it's the biggest recording of online trading in this country in our history. So there's definitely an appetite to shop. Retail, it gets misunderstood sometimes because we all see those for lease signs in our local shopping strips and suburban shopping centres where retailers close their stores. But of course, it's just a changing landscape rather than being the death of retail. So, we're in high hope. It is just a changing landscape, as I said.
Well, I know I'm certainly doing my part, Paul. I'm shopping up the storm. Let me reassure you of that. So just one of the things that I think is happening all over the world now, and you touched on it before in terms of CBDs, that for many people all over the world, what's exercising their mind is the death of CBDs. And how do you reactivate them? I can't help but think that retail has a really critical role to play in that reactivation of CBDs. Particularly with the new styles of bricks and mortar retailing, the experiential shopping.
Absolutely. So, the interesting strategy around physical stores, when I was doing consulting work in my past, the message I've been giving everybody was, of course, shrink their physical footprint, focus on digital, focus on high key locations, which obviously includes the CBD. Now, in a pandemic, that doesn't quite work, right? So if you think about my experience in department stores, their flagship locations are in the CBD areas. So they're really hard hit. So what we know is it's going to take about 5 years for the Sydney CBD to come back to its former glory. In Melbourne, it might take about a decade, according to recent research. So
Wow.
there's still a life in the CBD. They'll continue to thrive, but it will take time to recover, and a much slower recovery as people have to feel safe, and people have to return back to offices as well, and the borders have to open. So it's a watch this space, but it's not the death of those locations, but it will be a slow recovery.
Interesting, your comments about Melbourne. I know Victoria's been a particular case for the retailers, and just desperate and dreadful for you, as it has been for the tourism sector. I mean, Melbourne's always been perceived as the big shopping capital. And if it's going to take a decade for Melbourne to recover in that space, do you think there might be some movement in the shopping hierarchy around the country? Is that crown going to move to Sydney, or am I asking you a difficult question?
I think that's a good question. I think temporarily, yes. I think people will have a preference over, Chadstone's a good example. It's their premier sort of suburban shopping centre. So I think what we'll see is those shopping locations will thrive at the expense of CBD as people build confidence and the CBDs recover. But, if you're a cafe right now in a CBD location, no tourists, no people working from home, no people working in offices, that there's a slow grind. And dare I say, what we expect to see in Victoria, small business particularly, will do it so tough. And we expect about 50% of those businesses to close in the short term. So not sustainable, but again, it's just a long recovery, Margy, in these areas, as we sort of see, as the world reopens and we see tourists back and people back to some sort of whatever the new normal looks like.
So tell me about the engagement with government from your perspective, at sort of state, federal level, as far as you feel comfortable talking about. Do you think there's been a good hearing? Is there more government can be doing in your space to assist?
Look, I think I'm used to this space, Margy, so I'll say that up front. So I came into this role without any great expectations about government. So I expect, when I think of consultation, I think about it being truly consultation. There've been probably more information sessions, to be frank. So I found that a little frustrating. I know I've had the leading voice from a retail point of view in those forums, but sometimes these meetings are called very short notice. You might be on a call with many people. There was one call I was with 100 people. You can't quite call that consultation, but nevertheless, we've got the government's ear. It's been frustrating from both ends, and it's a roller coaster ride of expectations and delays. And, it's not a great example, I think, because if you take New South Wales and Victoria from a comparison perspective, New South Wales have got, higher caseloads at the moment and have proven that we can operate in a safe environment. And to be really honest with you, the supermarkets have led the way. They've actually shown that we can operate with whatever protocols are required. They've invested heavily at great cost to make sure consumers and the staff are safe, but that we can trade ongoing and safely. So I think it can be done. I think just different leadership.
Yeah. And look, I think you're right on the supermarkets. I think they really have stepped out in front and become part of the recovery process in many ways, because there is a sense of normality and confidence born out of simply being able to go to Woolies or Coles or wherever and do your shopping.
Well, absolutely. So we did a survey of our members. We have just under 8,000 ARA members, and 94% of the members have said they did not have one COVID issue. So in fact, it's a really safe place to be. In fact, most of the issues, if you think about Victoria, have come out of aged care or from private homes. They're not come from actually being in a store. So the retailers are very attuned to what is the right thing to do, because they've got a duty of care to their staff, but equally it's from a reputation point of view, don't want to have any issues. So, all this time has been used in making sure they're across all the infection control, and, they're working hard to be open as quickly as possible.
So let me ask you in closing,
yes,
the Christmas question. What do you think Christmas is going to be like this year? And, do you get the gut feel we're going to see borders open for Christmas? You know, I'm a constant optimist. I expect them to be open before Christmas. But what will happen if they're not, from your point of view?
Look, it would be devastating if we're not fully open for Christmas. There's no doubt. I mean, in the discretionary retail sector, up to 2/3 of profits made in this quarter. So, you know, it would be, it would force some companies into administration if we don't open. Now, in saying that, we've got a two-speed economy. There's Australia and then there's Victoria. There's a carve-out. So Victoria, of course, is the standout poor performer because we've been closed. The rest of the country's doing particularly well. WA is a star performer. They're in double-digit growth. But of course, across the whole country, retail has been quite buoyant. People can't travel, unfortunately, so they've either forced savings or they're actually spending money on their home. So categories like homewares are in double-digit growth. Essentials, because people are dining at home, are in double-digit growth. Supermarkets have done particularly well. Liquor has done particularly well.
I bet chocolate did really well too.
All those sort of comfort foods. So, you know, the funny thing from all of this is what has been selling has been anything with an elasticized waist. So, you know, anything, Ugg boots, pajamas, tracksuit pants have been, you know, in fact, retailers have been selling out. So we're closer to the fridge. We're staying at home, playing at home, shopping from home, in fact, because online is doing particularly well, and our waistlines are growing. So there'll be something for the fitness experts, I think, after the COVID to be as an opportunity.
Well, thank you very much for joining us today, Paul. We really appreciate it. Fingers and toes crossed for a fabulous Christmas, and my COVID kilos and I will be keeping an eye on those elastic waisted sales. So thank you very much. And let's all keep our fingers crossed for those borders to open.
Great.
Thank you.